This is the session for inclusive design and pedagogy, creating land acknowledgements, and we have a great group of presenters. I'm just going to read them in the order that they appear on the conference schedule on the website. So we have Kay Novak from Front Range Community College, Kristin Herman from Old Dominion University, Dr. Liu from James Madison University, Chris Luchs from Old Dominion University, Paula Marcelle from Indiana University, and Dr. Sylvia Rogers from Auburn University. And I will go ahead and hand it off to the presenters.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is a workshop, and I will tell you, we're all learning designers, so we overplanned this, okay? So in the sense that we're ready. If we had 70 people show up, we were ready for 70 people. It looks like we're gonna have a smaller, more intimate group, and that's not a problem. We'd like to welcome you. We put this under the category of inclusive design and pedagogy, and our topic for the workshop and what we'll be collaborating on is creating land acknowledgements. So Chris, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. For the e-learning consortium of Colorado, I'm a co-chair for ELK, and what we decided to do 2 years ago was to crowdsource a land acknowledgement that then became this. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So 2 years ago, as an organization, we made a decision about that we really needed to have something, and we needed to put it through, all of our organization. This took us, we started with a Google document. People put lots of links to other statements, to resources, to events that were happening, and over probably a 6 to 8-month period, we worked on this, and this is the result. After we realized that this is a work in progress, and we will change it. Our land acknowledgement evolved into a statement on racism and social justice, and this is what we read during. It can be conference sessions, it can be a meetings. But this is what we do. So I'm going to read it to you. With reverence, we would like to acknowledge the indigenous history of our state. Originally home to the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Comanche, Shoshone, and Ute nations, the landscape of Colorado and those who live here have experienced many social and cultural traumas since the formation of the Colorado Territory in 1861. These include the subjugation of the indigenous nations that culminated in the 1864 Sand Creek Massacre, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Arapaho and Cheyenne people. Colorado has also been the site of the 1880 anti-Chinese riot and the burning of Denver's budding Chinatown, the 1914 Ludlow Massacre of union workers and their families, the unjust internment and subsequent forced forfeiture of property and community of 7,000 Japanese Americans at Camp Amache, Grenada Relocation Center from 1942 to 1945, and countless other traumas experienced both publicly and privately by its inhabitants. These traumas continue today. Our historical neighborhoods of color are threatened by gentrification. 5 Points, an area of Denver known for its long history of Black-owned businesses, is now home to only 20 Black-owned businesses. Like many states, Colorado is just starting to come to terms with celebrating the historically white civic leaders through statues, street names, and neighborhood names, while grappling with some leaders such as Robert W. Speer and Benjamin Stapleton's sordid affiliation with racism and white supremacies. These traumas are not limited to gender, race, or ethnicity. We honor the experience of the multiple identities of each person. So this is what we do for the e-learning consortium of Colorado. for a land acknowledgement and a statement on racism and social justice. And we just wanted to start with this. And now we'll go into more of what we'll be doing in this workshop.
Great. So this is the spot where I come in. Hello, everybody. I'm Sylvia Rogers from the Harrison College of Pharmacy at Auburn University. Just sort of like an icebreaker to get us going, and you can answer in the chat area. Let's talk about a couple things. So we were just curious if you could tell us if the organization where you currently are employed, or perhaps you might be a student enrolled, has a land acknowledgement, or if you're aware of a land acknowledgement. So go ahead and feel free to just type like a yes or a no, or a Y or an N. Okay, I see some things coming in. I even see one that, yes, I learned of it just today. So I think that's great. Okay, a lot of not aware or does not. Great. That's great information to learn, I believe. Is it possible, and so this is the next question we can ask, is it possible that you are members of other organizations that have, so it could be a church or a club or anything of that nature, some kind of civic organization? So go ahead and answer that. You can either just say yes or no, or you can note, where that is. Okay, so it looks like we've got a few sprinkled in there, but a lot of not sures or not currently, although I did see at least one person who noted that there was one being developed now. So that's super interesting information. I'll be having somebody who said, I heard it done repeatedly at a conference. So that's great too. So here's another one. Now you heard now you saw the one that Kay read and described. When you think about a land acknowledgement, what do you think about? And like, what would be like a quick definition if you could type a short one in the chat? Or if you want, I think everybody can unmute. If you wanted to just holler it out or yell it out, as other people say. We say holler in Alabama. Anybody want to give it a shot? One, I like it. It can be more than one sentence. Oh, a statement that asks people to remember that past.
And this is Kay. I'll jump in because I do that. Okay. For us at ELK, when we discussed it, what we wanted was we wanted to disrupt the status quo. That was the purpose. Disrupt a narrative that does not include this history.
Yes, that's a great point. Okay, and then Cheryl noted acknowledging the sacrifices others have made before us. And I think that's also important to note. Does anybody want to note, or either in the chat or just jumping in like Kay did, like when did they start showing up in mainstream events? Does anybody have any notion? I can also give an example where I attend Church Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Auburn. We started doing land acknowledgements about, well, almost not quite 2 years ago. And that was the first time I had ever heard one. Somebody had 3 to 4 years. Very good. Oh, 2 weeks ago. Great. Well, now you're here with us, so we're happy to have you here. And of course, Kay gave an acknowledgement. She demonstrated for us the acknowledgement that ELK uses, and it was something that's read. There's other kinds of acknowledgements that can be done. Has anybody seen any like alternate ways of doing acknowledgements that you'd like to share? Or, feel free to either type in the chat or jump in. Of course, the one that Kay just demonstrated was, just reading it at the start of a conference or a conference workshop.
Hi, this is Cheryl. I first learned about land acknowledgements, I think a couple of years ago, but I was really intrigued when Kay brought it up last year. And mostly because I've studied some Native American pieces and in the past, and I just found it really intriguing to try to learn more about this. And I actually have some personal friends that have actually lived with Native Americans. They were honorably enjoined into the tribe, even though they're white people, because of some of the work that they've done and the respect that they've had for those tribes up in South Dakota and the Minnesota area. And so I've been having conversations with them about it. And I don't have a lot to add, but I just think that approaching this, we have to be extremely careful. And I'm going to post a link in the chat area of something that I read recently through EDUCAUSE on how a land acknowledgement spurred some controversy at the University of Washington. And so I just wanted to make you all aware of that because, well, as white people, we want to be very inclusive. We also need to be very mindful in the stepping of how in the approach of what we're doing, so that I think some of what's already been discussed and introduced covers some of that. So I'll just leave it at that for now and post the link, but looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's great, Cheryl. I appreciate everything you said. And then, some people noted syllabus, speaking, an Indigenous person speaking on stage. And then I've also seen them on websites too. I think maybe some people have seen that. So we're off to a great start. And again, so happy that everybody's had a chance to share a little bit. Kristin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristin Herman. I'm going to take us into the relevance part of our section here. I live and work outside of Philadelphia, so on land originally held by the Lenape people. And I want to speak about relevance in two separate ways here, relevance in terms of content, and then we're going to shift a little bit and talk about relevance in terms of process. So starting with relevance in terms of content and looking kind of as a broader pullout of our importance of land acknowledgements. Everything we're going to do today, everything we're going to talk about is simply guidelines. Cheryl's already brought up some of the controversy around these statements. There's certainly not a script. There's not a template that we can hand you and have you write a land acknowledgement statement. The fact that people here seem to be here for discussion and here for conversation, that's absolutely the right approach and the right intention we want to bring into this work. As we talked about, what did land acknowledgements include in the chat? We saw our second bullet point here, increased visibility of the past. But I know that our storyteller of the Lenape Nation, Adam Waterbear DePaul, he always talks about increased visibility of the present and the future as well. The Lenape people are not a dead people. They're not a people who have been historically eradicated from our lands. They still live and work in our communities here. Some of them, were forced assimilated into a more dominant culture. Some of them were not. But the tension between the past and the ongoing present, and that these tribes and these peoples have a future here in America, is going to be an important part of this conversation today. We're going to talk a lot about recognition and respect today. Recognition, I want to be careful with how we're defining that term. We don't mean recognition in the sense that someone's been mentioned or that we acknowledge, the acknowledgement term itself is so fraught. Recognition goes beyond that. Recognition means giving people seats at the table, allowing people's voices to be heard in all parts of the process here. Our goal is for understanding. It's not to solve problems. It's not that we think an acknowledgement statement like this wipes out any centuries worth of atrocities that have been committed, but we are working towards continual understanding and the knowledge that our land acknowledgement statements are just one approach of many, that these are not, again, the only way to address some of the inequities that have been perpetuated to our Indigenous cultures throughout the centuries. Chris, if you can click for me again, let's get back into some audience engagement. 2 more questions to think about, either by unmuting or in the chat. What do land acknowledgement statements mean to you as educators, as instructional designers, as educational technologists, kind of as graduate students, wherever you're kind of coming to the conference from? What do land acknowledgement statements mean to you in terms of your academic life?
Well, I'll talk again. I'm kind of like Kay. I just jump in sometimes. This is Cheryl. I think for me, I'm on the Council for Equity and Inclusion at our college. And I've learned so much in just the few years that I've been there, and being brought up as a white person with what I thought was disparity in my world I've been so enlightened in comparison to what other people have lived through. And I never thought of myself as being prejudiced, but yet I've unfolded or peeled back that layer of the onion. And I think it's just looking at the social injustices that happen every day, and how maybe how we don't even know that they're around us because we're so involved in our own world. We can't pull back the blinds to see what's going on. And as blessed as some of us are, many more of us aren't, I guess. And we just need to be really, really, again, mindful, as I said earlier, about our approach to talking about certain subjects. And I think just, again, recognizing the social injustices that occur for a variety of reasons, regardless of race, creed, color, background, or whatever. So I'll just state that.
I liked that every day that you mentioned. I see that coming up in the chat as well. You know, that this is part of our everyday, that this is part of every interaction I want to have. And yet that's a tension to our previous set of questions, right? Where we talked about land acknowledgement statements only appear at a syllabus that you look on the first day of class. They only get read at the start of a conference, and then the conference goes on for 4 or 5 more days. And so I really like that tension, and I'm excited to explore that tension with us today of how do we take a land acknowledgement statement like that and pull it through into the everyday and pull it through into the every interaction. I know I'm running a little long here. We do have a second question here, and Kay's giving me the okay. Don't worry about the time. All right, good, because this question I think is so important, and we're starting to get to already. If this is an everyday thing, if this is something that we need to be aware of every interaction throughout our syllabus, I'm reminded of Dr. Stefaniak this morning, reflecting in action as a reflective part of our practice constantly. Ideas here at the beginning of our session: how can our courses use land acknowledgement statements as a student learning activity? So not just for our own edification, but also as a student learning activity.
This is a little bit about what I put in the chat, and it's about acknowledging, I think, hidden and or minimized history of a place, especially land-grant universities, where a lot of the territory was Indigenous territory that was taken to create a university. Certainly Auburn is the case, and that needs to be acknowledged. I think people just aren't aware.
I like in the chat too, the comments going on about the heroes and holidays part of the course. I think that can be a little buzzword, but this idea, right, that, you know, we are now taking off for Juneteenth, perhaps at a lot of our various universities, which is great. And we're not trying to minimize anything that goes on with Juneteenth, but what else are we doing for Black people throughout the remainder of the year, or are Black people now only celebrated on Juneteenth? So pulling this again into a larger scope. One more here. Great, a great student perspective here in the chat, and how land acknowledgements have thought more deeply about work and scholarship connected to historical injustices. I think that's important too. I'm a student as well, and I work with hiring new teachers in a school district. And more we see this group, this generation of upcoming scholars, they're interested in these conversations, and they want to know how organizations have plans, systemic plans for these conversations. And so I think everything we can do to have these discussions now to continue to support the ongoing generations is so important. All right, Chris, here's where I can make us back some space. If you click me through, I'm going to switch to relevance of process here. We are going to, in just a few short minutes, embark in a design sprint. So I'm showing you a graphic here from Jake Knopp's 2016 work. He is the member of Google Ventures who came up with the design sprint process. And if you've been to ELK before, my understanding is that you're quite familiar with this process. But for those of us who are maybe newer in the door, design sprint is very confined to 5 days. There are certain time limits that you're going to do for each action. And the idea is that your design team at the end of the 5-day process has a minimum viable prototype, whether that's an artifact, whether that's an object, whether that's a textual statement. By the end of the 5 days, you have it. We don't have 5 days. The conference isn't 5 days long, and we won't keep you here for 5 days, God forbid. So let's focus in on our Tuesday and Wednesday here. And Chris is going to click us through one more time. When we think about our sketch, our ideation phase, and our decision phase, here's what we're going to focus on in terms of a mini design sprint or a design sprint process session today. In just a few minutes, we are going to split into some breakout rooms, and I think we're going to decide on how many breakout rooms based on how many participants we have. When you're in that breakout room, you're working on ideation and decision making. So you want to come to consensus on your purpose. And as we've seen here, that's already going to be a conversation. You need to also come up with an idea for a solution. So you are making some decisions. It can't be all conversations for the next 20 minutes. You're going to have to get something down. You'll have a Google Jamboard as a tool that'll help you to sketch out some competing solutions, make some decisions. If you have time for step 5 and you can collaboratively flesh out the best solution, that's great. If all you can get to is a decision that you're throwing up on the Jamboard, we do want you to be ready, because when you come back, step 6, there is some public acknowledgement, public awareness, public sharing of your statement. It's not just staying in your own Google Drive. So we want you to be aware and ready for that. That's me. Someone else is dividing you up. Okay, is that you?
Yeah, I can talk about this. Okay, so we have a total of 16 people. Because of this, I say we only do 2 breakout rooms, because that would be a good number even if we were doing a focus group. So here's what I'm going to say. Now everybody tell me, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna suggest two breakout rooms. So I'll need, if we were to break out into a breakout room for people who are doing a national online program, a land acknowledgement for a national online program, meaning there's students that could be from anywhere, and then an international online program where it means students could be from anywhere internationally. How many people would want to go into the international online program for that discussion? Because that's really what's going to tell me how we divide people up. So if you're willing to go into to a sprint that will do an international online program, just type Y in the discussion. And if we get nobody, then I know there's a different way to divide this up. I'm not seeing anybody yet.
Okay, just a suggestion.
Yes.
Would a national versus a regional online program, 2 breakout rooms makes more sense?
That's what I'm thinking would. Okay, so thanks, Christie. Let's divide it into that. Jessica, can you give us 1 room, and the first room call it a national online program, and the second room call it a regional online program? So people can decide when they go into the rooms, whether it's going to be a national program where you get students from everywhere. They can be, that your student population, a majority of them are not from one geographic location. Okay, so that's breakout room 1. Breakout room 2 will be a regional online program. And because of the number that we have, I'll take lead in 2, and I think I will go ahead and make sure that we quickly decide on what our region will be. So if you can divide us into those 2 groups, that would be great.
And I have gone ahead and made this allow participants to choose rooms. So the attendees of this session, you should be able, once the breakout room notification happens, you should be able to self-select, and the co-hosts, you should also be able to self-select into which rooms you're in. Tell me when you want me to open the rooms.
Okay, so we have 1 and 2, and it's in chat, so you can know which one to pick. Okay, for breakout room 1, which is the national one, out of my co-hosts, who would like to be the facilitator for that one? So I just like an official facilitator for room 1. I can be the official.
Paula's raising her hand. I don't know if you can see
okay, Paula. Great. Paula, you take the national. I'll take the facilitation for the regional online program. And then I would say, if one of the other facilitators can come with me in 2, you can be the person who records. And if one of the facilitators will go into 1 to be the recording person. So we're just doing these little logistic things right now.
I'm going to hang out here in case somebody comes, and then I can send them to, tell them, what y'all are doing.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms if that sounds good. All right, so everyone should have an invitation to join one of the breakout rooms, either the regional room or the national program room. And if there are any attendees unable to select,
hey everybody. How did your group go too?
Do you see my hair like falling out here?
No, I mean, oh God, the discussion was great, but it's totally back to Jill Stefanik's things. We thought when we were going in, we were doing one thing, but we ended up with something else, but that's okay. So for group 1, go ahead and debrief, and then we can debrief group 2.
Okay, does anyone from group 1 wants to come on the mic? Dr. Comstock?
Come on, Cheryl. Yeah, Cheryl's my conference buddy, by the way. In face-to-face conferences, I make sure I sit next to Cheryl any conference I can, because she's the most fun person to talk to during conferences.
Well, Cheryl spoke a lot, but we got some good information out of it. And I don't know if we're allowed to share our Jamboard or not, but we came up with about 6 or 7 basic ideas of where we wanted to start.
Okay, I'll share our Jamboard. You can see all of our notes for a second, but here, sure. One more. There, Cheryl, if that helps.
There we go. So as you can see, we started out kind of more simplistic, and we kind of grew and got a little bit deeper into how we were really thinking about it. And as I was talking, fortunately, we had a couple of very articulate and bright people in the room to help make it sound so much better. So I think part of the main point, we didn't get much past this first step, but what we did recognize is that one of the most important pieces is to recognize the elders as far back as we can go and co-create something with those people, because they're the ones that have the history and that they can inform us of what they actually went through, which is probably one of the steps that is often skipped with writing a land acknowledgement from the research that I've done. And there are as most of you can read, we also recognize that there are multiple and overlapping groups of people that have been taken advantage of and disgraced over time, and that it just depending on, you know, how you go about this, you need to take that into effect as well. So I don't know. I think, Kristin, maybe you could add some extra information, or Paula, or even Dr. Liu. Go ahead.
Right. I think our work in our group gave us all pause. We could have used the whole 60 minutes just in this group and we probably still wouldn't be done. And so that's a great recognition and of this work, of how much work it takes and how much work it should take. And how you need to have, I think we had talked about previously, and I kind of started typing this phrase here, about one option is bringing someone in to read a land acknowledgement statement at an event like this. And we talked about how that collaboration and that partnership needs to go back so much further. It needs to go into the creation of any sort of statement like this, which I thought was a really great point.
What stood out to me too in the conversation and the reflections was, that we should not just focus on one group, that many groups will marginalize, and consideration should be given in inputting it, similar to the ELK statement in the land acknowledgements created.
Okay, I was going to say for group 2, I can share ours on the screen. Does anybody from group 2 other than me want to talk? Because I talk too much. So if anybody else would like to talk, please. Any volunteers? You can unmute yourself. Okay, not seeing any volunteers, but so I found that what you were talking about, I think our group, and feel free to type in chat, anybody who wants to type in chat. I think we found the same thing, that, whoa, this is so much. we first of all, we introduced ourselves, and then we started to go, well, what about the Midwest? And so we put up here that maybe we'll try Indiana, Minnesota, Michigan, Great Lakes. We started at, and I don't know if everybody's seen it, probably everyone has seen it by now, has gone to the website that has native lands on it. And with native, yeah, thanks for sharing. And with native lands, you can take a look at this. And it's interesting because the native lands also shows the treaty and the language. So that gives other information for the land acknowledgements, and the treaties will come up later for us also too. Like group 1, this group felt that there should be research about the other traumas that happened to people on the land. And there were references to the Elk statement. We talked about a collaboration platform. Sorry, we're ed techers, we can't help it. We talked a little bit about a collaboration platform, and we all agreed we need a collaboration platform. And it would not be Padlet. Padlet was voted out. And for the purposes of this, Jamboard wasn't bad, but Then we talked about, was our region too big? And we had a discussion about, okay, even though we're supposed to be regional, do we have to limit, do we have to make it to the service area or possibly the instructor location if the instructor is doing it? And it was mentioned once, but we didn't get to talk about it really in detail, but that this decision is a power decision. Who has power? Who has the power to make this decision? I wish we had more time to go into that, but we didn't. Then we talked about, because we saw it on the native lands, that you can pull up treaties, and also discuss that, sometimes the land is unseceded, that it was not, it was just taken. There was no treaty. But we felt that the treaty or the unseceded land could help us dig deeper into the trauma that happened on the land. One of our participants had just finished reading the book 1619 and made a suggestion that we take a look at the displacement chapter there and see and look at that when we're talking about land acknowledgements and displacement of people. And then we started to go to a deeper dive into what about who's the original tribe on that land. In the Southeast, there were tribes through the Trail of Tears that were sent on a death march to Oklahoma. How do you recognize that? So I think if we had to come with one theme, it was like, not one person there was like, oh yeah, let's get it done and over with. Everybody felt that they had to dig deeper. And so that's what I would put for our group. And I will stop my screen share. Okay, so what our next plan is that you've had that. So here's your evolving scenario. We're going to send you back to the group to discuss this. Okay, so Chris, and this was something that we kind of suggested. This is something we kind of suggested at the beginning, and we'll give you some resources at the end of this. But we made it into an evolving scenario. Let's say we had all day to work on this land acknowledgement, and then we were able to share it with people, and we've taken it back to our organization. So here's our scenario. After taking the land acknowledgement back to your organization and including it in your syllabus, and your coworkers are including it in their syllabi too, your supervisor asks to meet with you about it over Zoom, and you're like, yay, we did something great. The Zoom meeting starts well, but then your supervisor says they received an email from a student who addressed them as your supervisor, asking if the department would be doing anything more than adding land acknowledgements in the syllabus. Your supervisor asks if you can spend some time now coming up with some ideas. And that's the break. And that's where we're going to send you back for a little bit of time to talk about, okay, we've thought about these land acknowledgements already. Let's say we've written one. What would be the next step? And the article that Cheryl shared with us in chat from Inside Higher Ed is totally right on the nose for that one, because if you read that article from Inside Higher Ed, it is about, you've done a land acknowledgement, but now what? Yeah, Kristin, thank you for sharing that again. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into breakout room 1 and breakout room 2, and let's discuss this. We have a little bit of time, so let's discuss say you've crafted your land acknowledgement, it's out there, you've got it on, you got it in everybody's syllabus. What do you as learning designers, what do you as instructors, how are you going to answer? What do you do next?
And Kay, when do you want me to close the breakout rooms?
When is our official time closing?
12:25 is the end time.
Okay, so everybody, let's just do a 10-minute sprint. If we all go into them now, do a 10-minute sprint about ideas. So just top of the mind ideas, put it out there, and then at 17 after, bring us back and we'll do a quick debrief. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next year, this has to be a 2-day project
Oh yeah, I think so. Well,
or a 3-day project.
or we have Elk do this as perhaps a workshop that's not part of the conference. We can put it somewhere else because
Yeah,
we could spend a lot more time, and we should be spending this kind of time.
but we need to invite all these wonderful people from these other colleges back too.
Yeah. Okay, so group 1, you want to go?
Sure, I'll summarize it through. I'll share my screen and I'll summarize. I'll take them both. I really liked what kind of came up. Our first reaction was this idea of a critical think piece, maybe an assignment for students, but again, thinking systemically, going back to Dr. Stefaniak this morning, thinking of how we as instructors, we as designers ourselves often don't know, giving us more time to do research, to write our own narrative of realization, our own exposition, sharing those with students, allowing students to do the same, sharing those back. This was our initial reaction. And then we kind of built up this idea because this research needs to happen and we're able to invite people in, we're able to undertake community readings together, critical readings, then maybe that critical reflection piece can be the third step actually there. So even though it was our first idea, we saw it being part of a process. We did talk a little bit about, it does seem to be a certain group of people who self-select into sessions like this. How do we maybe involve people who don't self-select? And so again, trying to open up those conversations, that was a big theme for us. This one got tiny, let me make it bigger. I really liked this that was brought up right as we were closing. We didn't get to talk about it too much, but whether or not a university would allow performance appraisal linked to service, which isn't unheard of, linked to service, but service of minoritized groups. And then does that bring more people to the conversation?
Okay, I can screen share and do ours really quickly because I'm agreeing that this is not enough time, and that in the future we will look for more time for these. So just want to thank everybody. Now let me go ahead and screen share. Okay. These were ideas that were put up. What about a video with more information about the tribe? So not just that acknowledgement, but also resources being put after that. Find descendants and elders from the tribe. And, as learning designers, we can think of lots of different ways to have them communicate. Look to create an advisory board of representative groups that could help us with this. Invite collaborating groups to campus events and look to see how we can integrate this into the content and the perspectives in our courses. I mean, we can record things, we can bring people in. It's not like that. We don't create content all the time. Incorporate tribal origin stories to explain the importance of the tribe. So going back to what's been said before, past, present, and future. Not just like a historical past, but an origin story that is for people who are living today and for the future. And then this one is hiring practices to represent students and families. Since it was a supervisor in our scenario, going back to the supervisor and saying, hey, what are we doing about hiring practices? Making sure that there's funding and that there's actually monetary incentives or just funding to bring in parents and parent clubs and committees and field trips that actually go to places. English language, arts, and history standards using Indigenous material. We had Sam from Minnesota telling us that it works out well because it is part of their standards. Indigenous material about Indigenous people is part of the standards. Is it like that in all of our states? Maybe we can advocate it for it to be. And I threw Indigenous languages in the last second as we were leaving the room. So that's what we came up with.
All right. Well, in our final 3 minutes, we have turn over to Christie for conclusions.
All right, I'll try. That is the hardest part.
But you're the friendliest one of us, so that's
Yeah, that's the very friendly assignment. So I try. I'm Dr. Jihong Christeville, the Director of Instructional Design from James Madison University, and currently the Culture, Learning, and Technology Division of AECT President, the Division President, not the AECT President. I inherited a lot of treasures from CLT, Culture, Learning, and Technology, the intersection between culture, learning, and technology. So I want to acknowledge that. And so that gives me a very cross-cultural lenses of looking at things. And this project prompted me to look at where my physical location is related to Indigenous communities. So Shenandoah Valley is the physical location. It is related to I try to correct my pronunciation, the Sui and the Algonquian and the Haudenosaunee communities of Indigenous tribes, according to developing land acknowledgement statement. And I know there is a task force has been working hard on it. So that's my where I'm from of the summary. And then these two groups, I really appreciate all this fundamental discussions we have. And then we agreed that creating a land acknowledgement is not simple. So that's the simple solution. Conclusion of today. And then from round one of the sprint, the group one had two major conclusions. One is acknowledging the elders as much far back in the history to stay true with the history. And then number two is about multiple and overlapping groups of people, especially related to national online programs. How do we leverage and inclusively acknowledge all and acknowledge each? And then in the group two, there are many excellent points, but we all agreed we need to dig deeper into the history to understand the trauma. And trauma is one word, but there are so many directions, like the displacement, like the educational paths. So these are all related from the round one design sprint discussion. And then the round two sprint discussion, group one highlight 2 points. One is about using the formed land acknowledgement statements as critical thinking instruction and analysis demonstration, as well as then for student learning activities. And then number two was about, we questioned whether a university needs to have a service to minoritize the groups of people as possible strategies to include more original indigenously rooted people into the conversation of DEIJA. And then in group 2, there are many excellent points thinking about finding descendants of Indigenous tribes, including tribal descendants of Indigenous tribes as advisory boards, and then hiring, including tribal descendants, and designing and implementing field trips for relevant subject areas. So these are the discussion. I may have missed the points or with the note. So please refer back to the recordings of the breakout rooms when it's possible. And then the next piece, the group wanted me to report to us, and also inviting the conversation is an approved IRB project. This group with Kristin, Kay, Chris, and Paula, and a group of others, Dr. Sylvia Rogers included, we proposed a research project titled as The Impact of Inclusion Learning, Level 1, Acknowledging Indigenous Roots in Learning Design. So this project is an interdisciplinary and cross-cultural, cross-institutional IRB. So that the IRB was housed and approved by James Madison University, with participants from 4 or 5 higher ed institutions. So we're hoping to start from this research project from now and then continue, and we welcome all your participation. Did I miss anything, group?
I don't think so. I think you were as friendly as we thought you would be. So really what here's our ask. We would like to do research on this and how to design this. If you're willing for us to do an interview with you, since you participated in this exercise, please let us have your email address so that we can contact you about it.
Just so you know, we won't be sharing them for any kinds of nefarious or otherwise purposes.
Yeah,
Only
exactly.
for this purpose, and after that, we will get rid of them.
Hey, it looks like there's a message from Cheryl about needing permission.
Oh, okay. Kristin, were you the person who created the form? You might have to change the
Working on changing the permissions.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting us know about that, Cheryl, because otherwise we'd be like, oh.
I've also posted all the slides and the resources in the Discord channel for land acknowledgement.